You're listening to Beyond the Plate with Andrew Kaplan. This sounds so weird. You're listening to Beyond the Plate with Cappy.
Hey everyone, this is Cappy and you're listening to Just the Plate, a production of Beyond the Plate. Just the Plate is a short segment where chefs describe a recipe, sharing insider tips and tricks on what makes this their favorite dish. Last week we heard from Chef Tom Colicchio. Tom is the chef and owner of Crafted Hospitality. He has restaurants in New York, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, one of my favorite sandwich spots spread across New York City called Witchcraft, which you heard me express my love for last episode. Tom is the head judge on Top Chef. He's a cookbook author. He's a food activist. Tom co-founded the Food Policy Action Group. This is a group that holds legislators accountable for their voting records around food. And they do this by issuing an annual scorecard. It's a super interesting group, and I highly encourage you to check them out. We'll share more about their website and where to get in touch with them at the end of this episode. But if you did miss last week's episode where Tom goes into great detail about food policy action and the other work he does, please be sure to check that out. In this episode for Just the Plate, Tom's going to share a recipe that he just made for his family. It's a Tuscan fish stew called Cacciucco, not to be confused with cioppino. Cioppino is actually an Italian-American fish stew type dish that originated in San Francisco, believe it or not. But Tom, he's been making this dish for about 30 years for his family, and he made it this year in a pressure cooker for the first time, and it took a fraction of the time. It was super interesting because I don't have any experience with a pressure cooker, quite frankly, so I asked him a bunch of questions about it, stovetop or electric, and how long on things, and then he started talking about some other things he does in the pressure cooker. He happens to be a big fan of them. I'll stop talking, but this is Just the Plate.
This is Tom Colicchio, chef and restaurateur and food advocate, father of the three, and fishing fanatic. And my recipe that I want to share with you today is a fish stew. It's a Tuscan fish stew called Cacciucco. And this is a dish that I cook every Christmas Eve as part of the Feast of Seven Fishes. So it's on the top of my mind. In fact, as soon as I'm done with it, I'll probably end up eating some of the leftovers for lunch. But it starts by using making a base of sofrito, Italian sofrito. In this case, it's a white sofrito. So it's celery, leeks, fennel, and onion. If you like, you can actually put everything through a food processor, with the exception of the onion. So just pulse everything until it's very, very finely grated, and then add in a fine dice of onion into the food processor, and you could pulse that for a couple pulses as well. It should be very, very finely chopped, as fine as possible. Now, typically, when you make the sofrito, you cook it for about 2 hours on the stove in a good amount of olive oil, enough olive oil to pretty much cover the vegetables. This year, I tried something a little different. I actually cooked it in a pressure cooker. And so I cut the 2-hour cook time down to about 20 minutes. All the vegetables in the pressure cooker, a good amount of olive oil, medium pressure for 20 minutes until it's completely cooked. After that, feel free to open the pressure cooker and just turn on the simmer switch, if you have a simmer switch on your pressure cooker, to actually just let some of the water cook out of it. And after you have it reducing for about 10 minutes or so, then you take the next step. The next step for the Cacciucco would be to add some squid. So about a cup or so of squid, the tentacles and the tubes sliced straight across. Let that cook for in the pressure cooker, again under medium pressure. Let that cook for about 10 minutes in the pressure cooker. Release the pressure, open up the top. Now you have to add clams. You can add about 2 dozen clams, and back to the pressure cooker, pressurize it, and cook for another 4 minutes. At that point, the clams should be open. Open the lid, add tomatoes, some crushed, whole plum tomatoes that you just crush by hand. I add 2 cans to this. Lid back on, pressure cooker for about another 3 or 4 minutes. At that point, your base is done. And so you have your base. It's a light tomato, really earthy flavor. You're going to get some aromatics from the vegetables. You can add additional fennel seed to it if you like. And then what I do is put it into a pot, take it out of the pressure cooker. It goes into a large sautoir. And then to finish the dish, you can start adding your seafood. Now, what I do is add lobster, shrimp, scallops. And the lobster I pre-cook. Each lobster, cook only about 2 or 3 minutes. Take the meat out of the shell, cut it into 1-inch chunks. So I start by adding the scallops, the sea scallops, let that gently cook, add the shrimp, gently cook, and then finish it with the lobster. When I'm done, a fresh grating of lemon zest, a good amount of lemon zest that you use a grater or a microplaner, and top with a good amount of parsley, and that's pretty much it.
In terms of pressure cooker, I'm just curious, do you use a stovetop one or electric, or have you used one off to electric? I've never used one, but people ask me. I'm curious.
Yeah, they're actually great. I mean, I make chicken soup in 20 minutes.
Wow.
And it's clear. It's 18 minutes under pressure with the whole chicken, water, maybe bay leaves and some thyme, rosemary. Pressure cooker, 20 minutes. Open up the lid, add carrot, celery, onion, leek. Back in for about 3-4 minutes. Done.
That's incredible. So electric, you said?
Yeah. Now, if you don't have a pressure cooker for the Cacciucco, again, you'd have to cook the sofrito for about 2 hours. Then add the squid. The squid you have to cook for about 45 minutes. And then add the clams until they're open. And then the tomatoes, let that cook for about another 20-25 minutes before adding all the other seafood.
Got it. So it's usually like a long form process. But this is the first year you did pressure cooker and you're happy with it?
First year. Yeah, pretty happy. I think I didn't reduce it after I made the base, the original sofrito. And I think that's what I would have done a little differently. I would have reduced it down because it was a little thin, but still the flavor was really great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously add salt and pepper. If you want it a little spicier, you can add some Calabrian chilies to it. But that's pretty much it. Alter any seafood you want. If you want to add octopus to it, obviously you should cook use a recipe to cook the octopus first, and then just finish it in the, cut it up to pieces and finish it in there. You can add bay scallops. Pretty much, if you want to add pieces of fish, you could do that as well. Cod would work really well. Monkfish would work really well. Some kind of fish that's really meaty. But that's really it. Great fish stew. I've been making this recipe for about 30 years now at home. It's a real crowd favorite. But it's not like a cioppino. It's not a heavy tomato-based sauce. More flavor from the vegetables itself. In fact, it should actually be almost brownish in color, not red. And it just has a deep seafood and kind of earthy smell and flavor to it. It's a little different than a sort of bright tomato-based fish stew.
That sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you have a good week and maybe get a couple minutes off. Thanks, Tom.
Take care, man.
Have a good day. Bye. Find more on Tom Colicchio at craftedhospitality.com and foodpolicyaction.org. This episode was produced by Ian Cohen, Joe Yeaton, and myself. You can find me and keep up to date with this podcast across all social media platforms at On Cappy's Plate or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. If you would please do us a favor and rate or review or subscribe to this podcast on whatever listening service you use, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, any of them. It would greatly help and we appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Just the Plate, a production of Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy.